दूसरा लोग सुनाया नहीं होता।
August. 20th of August.
19.
23rd August.
Reading cousin.
With the time now.
5:34.
Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, Chapter 16, King Chitraketu meets the Supreme Lord. Text 1. Sri Sukdev Goswami said, My dear King Parikshit, by his mystic power, the great sage Narad brought the dead son into the vision of all the lamenting relatives and then spoke as follows. Text 2. Sri Narad Muni said, O living entity, all good fortune unto you. Just see, your father and mother, all your friends and relatives are overwhelmed with grief because of your passing away. Because you died untimely, the balance of your lifetime still remains. Therefore, you may re-enter your body and enjoy the remainder of your life, surrounded by your friends and relatives, accept the royal throne and all the opulences given by your father. By the mystic power of Narad Muni, the living entity re-entered his dead body for a short time and then spoke in reply to Narad Muni's request. He said, according to the results of my facultative activities, I, the living entity, transmigrate from one body to another, sometimes going to the species of the demigods, sometimes to the species of lower animals, sometimes among the vegetables, and sometimes to the human species. Therefore, in which birth were these my mother and father? No one is actually my mother and father.
Yeah.
How can I accept these two people as my parents? Purport. Here it is made clear that the living being enters a material body that is like a machine created by the five gross elements of material nature: earth, water, fire, air, and sky, and the three subtle elements: mind, intelligence, and ego. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, there are two separate identities called the inferior and superior natures, which both belong to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to the results of a living entity's fruitive actions, he is forced to enter the material elements in different type of bodies. This time the living entity was supposed to have been the son of Maharaj Chitraketu and Queen Kirtadviti, because according to the laws of nature, he had entered a body made by the king and queen. Actually, however, he was not their son. The living entity is the son of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and because he wants to enjoy this material world, the Supreme Lord gives him a chance to enter various bodies. The living entity has no true relationship with the material body he gets from his material father and mother. He is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but he is allowed to go through different bodies. The body created by the so-called father and mother actually has nothing to do with its so-called creators. Therefore, the living entity flatly denied that Maharaj Chitraketu and his wife were his father and mother. Text 5. In this material world, which advances like a river that carries away the living entity, all people become friends, relatives, and enemies in due course of time. They also act neutrally, they mediate, they despise one another, and they act in many other relationships. Nonetheless, despite these various transactions, no one is permanently related. But it is our practical experience in this material world that the same person who is once friend today becomes one's enemy tomorrow. Our relationships as friends or enemies, family men or outsiders, are actually the results of our different dealings. Chitraketu Maharaj was lamenting for his son, who was now dead, but he could have considered the situation otherwise. This living entity, he could have thought, was my enemy in my last life, and now, having appeared as my son, he is prematurely living just to give me pain and agony. Why should he not consider his dead son his former enemy, and instead of lamenting, be jubilant because of enemy's death? As stated in Bhagavad Gita 3.27, Pragate Kriya Manani Gunah Karmani Sarvashaha. Actually, everything is happening because of our association with the modes of material nature. Therefore, one who is my friend today in association with the mode of goodness may be my enemy tomorrow in association with the modes of passion and ignorance. As the modes of material nature work, in illusion we accept others as friends, enemies, sons, or father in terms of the reactions of different dealings under different conditions. Text 6. Just as gold and other commodities are continually transferred from one place to another in due course of purchase and sale, so the living entity, as a result of his fruitive activities, wanders throughout the entire universe, being injected into various bodies in different species of life by one kind of father and mother. Father after mother. Purpose. It has already been explained that Chitraketu's son was his enemy in a past life, and had now appeared as a son just to give him more severe pain. Indeed, the untimely death of the son caused severe lamentation for the father. One may put forward the argument, if the king's son was his enemy, how could the king have so much affection for him? In answer, the example is given that when someone's wealth falls into the hands of his enemy, the money becomes the enemy's friend. Then the enemy can use it for his own purposes. Indeed, he can even use it to harm its previous owner. Therefore, the money belongs neither to the one party nor to the other. The money is always money, but in different situations, it can be used as an enemy or a friend. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, it is not by any father or mother that the living entity is given his birth. The living entity is a completely separate identity from the so-called father and mother. By the laws of nature, the living entity is forced to enter the semen of a father and be injected into the womb of the mother. He is not in control of selecting what kind of father he will accept. Pravate Kriya Ma Nani. The laws of nature force him to go to different fathers and mothers, just like a consumer commodity that is purchased and sold. Therefore, the so-called relationship of father and mother, father and son, is an arrangement of Prakriti or nature. It has no meaning and therefore it is called illusion. The same living entity sometimes takes shelter of an animal father and mother, and sometimes a human father and mother. Sometimes he accepts a father and mother among the birds, and sometimes he accepts a demigod father and mother. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore says, Brahmana Brahmide Kono Bhagavana Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Rata Beach. Harassed life after life by the laws of nature, the living entity wanders throughout the entire universe in different planets and different species of life. Somehow or other, if he is fortunate enough, he comes in touch with a devotee who reforms his entire life. Then the living entity goes back home, back to Godhead. Therefore it is said, Janame Janame Sava Pita Mata Paya, Krishna Guru Nahi Mile, Bhaja Hari Hare. In the transmigration of the soul through different bodies, everyone in every form of life, be it human, animal, tree or demigod, gets a father and mother. This is not very difficult. The difficulty is to obtain a bona fide spiritual master and Krishna. Therefore, the duty of a human being is to capture the opportunity to come in touch with Krishna's representative, the bona fide spiritual master. Under the guidance of the spiritual master, the spiritual father, one can return back home, back to Godhead. That's the law. A few living entities are born in the human species and others are born as animals. Although both are living entities, their relationships are impermanent. An animal may remain in the custody of a human being for some time, and then the same animal may be transferred to the possession of other human beings. As soon as the animal goes away, the former proprietor no longer has a sense of ownership. As long as the animal is in his possession, he certainly has an affinity for it. But as soon as the animal is sold, the affinity is lost. Perfect. Aside from the fact that the soul transmigrates from one body to another, even in this life, the relationship between living entities are impermanent, as exemplified in this verse. The son of Chitraketu was named Harshok, or jubilation and lamentation. The living entity is certainly eternal, but because he is covered by a temporary dress, the body, his eternity is not observed. Dehino asmin yata dehe komaram yoganam jara. The embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age. Thus the bodily dress is impermanent. The living entity, however, is permanent. As an animal is transferred from one owner to another, the living entity, who was the son of Chitraketu, lived as his son for some time. But as soon as he was transferred to another body, the affectionate relationship was broken. As stated in the example given in the previous verse, when one has a commodity in his hands, he considers it his. But as soon as it is transferred, it becomes someone else's commodity. Then one no longer has a relationship with it, he has no affection for it, nor does he lament for it. Text 8. Even though one living entity becomes connected with another because of a relationship based on bodies that are perishable, the living entity is eternal. Actually, it is the body that is born or lost, not the living entity. One should not accept that the living entity take birth or dies. The living being actually has no relationship with so-called fathers and mothers. As long as he appears as a son of a certain father and mother, as a result of his past procreative activities, he has a connection with the body given by that father and mother. Thus he falsely accepts himself as their son and acts affectionately. After he dies, however, the relationship is finished. Under these circumstances, one should not be falsely involved with jubilation and lamentation. Purport. When the living entity lives within the material body, he falsely thinks that he is the body, although actually he is not. His relationship with his body and his so-called father and mother are false, illusory conceptions. These illusions continue as long as one is not enlightened about the situation of the living entity. Next number. The living entity is eternal and imperishable because he actually has no beginning and no end. He never takes birth or dies. He is the basic principle of all types of bodies. Yet he does not belong to the bodily category. The living being is so sublime that he is equal in quality to the Supreme Lord. Nonetheless, because he is extremely small, he is prone to be illusioned by the external energy, and thus he creates various bodies for himself according to his different desires. Purport. In this verse, the philosophy of Achintya Veda Ved, simultaneous oneness and difference is considered. The living entity is eternal, Nitya, like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the difference is that the Supreme Lord is the greatest, no one being equal to or greater than him. Whereas the living entity is Sukshma or extremely small. The Shastra describes that the magnitude of the living entity is 1,000 the size of the tip of the hair. The Supreme Lord is all-pervading. Andantara stha dharmanu chayantara.
साहेब कितने
550. नहीं गुड मैन नाइस एटमॉस्फेयर कल जैसे भी
Relatively, if the living entity is accepted as the smallest, there should naturally be inquiry about the greatest. The greatest is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the smallest is the living entity. Another peculiar characteristic of the Jiva is that he becomes covered by Maya. Atma Maya Gunaya. He is prone to being covered by the Supreme Lord's illusory energy. The living entity is responsible for his conditioned life in the material world, and therefore he is described as Prabhu, the Master. If he likes, he can come to this material world And if he likes, he can return back home, back to Godhead. Because he wanted to enjoy this material world, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gave him a material body through the agency of the material energy. As the Lord himself says in Bhagavad Gita 18.26.1, Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Hrideshe Arjuna Tishtati. Brahman Sarva Bhutani Yantra Rudani Maya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. The Supreme Lord gives the living entity a chance to enjoy in this material world as he desires. But he openly expresses his own desire that the living entity give up all material aspirations, fully surrender unto him, and return home back to Godhead. The living entity is the smallest, Shukshma. Jiva Goswami says in this connection, the living entity within the body is extremely difficult for materialistic scientists to find. And although we understand from authorities that the living entity is within the body is different from the living entity. Text 10. For this living entity, no one is dear, nor is anyone unfavorable. He makes no distinction between that which is his own and that which belongs to anyone else. He is one without a second. In other words, he is not affected by friends and enemies, well-wishers, or mischief mongers. He is only an observer, a witness of the different qualities of men. Purport. As explained in the previous verse, the living entity has the same qualities as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he has them in minute quantities because he is a small particle, Shukshma. Whereas the Supreme Lord is all pervading and great. For the Supreme Lord, there are no friends, enemies, or relatives, for he is completely free from all the disqualifications of ignorance that characterize the conditioned soul. On the other hand, he is extremely kind and favorable to his devotees, and is not at all satisfied with persons who are envious of his devotees. As the Lord himself confirms in Bhagavad Gita 9.29, Samoham sarva bhuteshu name deveshu asti na priyaha ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya maite teshu chapi aham. I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. But whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him.
Very beautiful word.
The Supreme Lord has no enemy or friend, but he is inclined towards a devotee who always engages in his devotional service. Similarly, elsewhere in the Gita 16.19, the Lord says, Tan aham dvishsaha kruran samsareshu naradhaman shipami ajsaram ashubhan asuri eva yonishu. Those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. The Lord is extremely antagonistic toward those who are envious of his devotees. To protect his devotees, the Lord sometimes has to kill their enemies. For example, to protect Prahlad Maharaj, the Lord had to kill his enemy Hiranyakashipu. Although Hiranyakashipu attained salvation because of being killed by the Lord, since the Lord is the witness of everyone's activities, he witnesses the actions of the enemies of the devotees, and he is inclined to punish them. In other cases, however, he simply witnesses what the living entities do and gives the results of one's sinful or pious actions. Text 11. The Supreme Lord, Atma, the creator of cause and effect, does not accept the happiness and distress that result from fruitive activities, fruitive actions. He is completely independent of having to accept a material body, and because he has no material body, he is always neutral. The living entities, being part and parcel of the Lord, possesses his qualities in a minute quantity. Therefore, one should not be affected by limitation. But the conditioned soul has friends and enemies. He is affected by the good qualities and faults of his position. The Supreme Lord, however, is always transcendental. Because he is the Ishvara, the Supreme Controller, he is not affected by duality. It may therefore be said that he sits in the core of everyone's heart as a neutral witness of the causes and effects of one's activities, good and bad. We should also understand that Udasina, neutral, does not mean that he takes no action. Rather, it means that he is not personally affected. For example, a court judge is neutral when two opposing parties appear before him, but he still takes action as the case warrants. To become completely neutral, indifferent to material activities, we should simply seek shelter at the lotus feet of the Supreme Neutral Person. Maharaj Ketu was advised that remaining neutral in such trying circumstances as the death of one's son is impossible. Nevertheless, since the Lord knows how to adjust everything, the best course is to depend upon Him and do one's duty in devotional service to the Lord. In all circumstances, one should be undisturbed by duality. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 2.47, Karmani eva dikaraste ma phaleshu kadachan ma karma phal hetu mate sangosta akarmani. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to fruits of action. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities and never be attached to not doing your duty. One should execute one's devotional duty, and for the results of one's action, one should depend upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 12. Shri Shukdev Goswami continued. When the conditioned soul, Jiva, in the form of Maharaj Chitraketu's son, had spoken in this way and then left, Chitraketu and other relatives of the dead son were all astonished. Thus they cut off the shackles of their affection, which was due to their relationship with him, and gave up their emulation. Text 13. After the relatives had discharged their duties by performing the proper funeral ceremonies and burning the dead child's body, they gave up the affection that leads to illusion, lamentation, fear, and pain. Such affection is undoubtedly difficult to give up, but they gave it up very easily. Text 14. Queen Kirtadyuti's co-wives who had poisoned the child were very much ashamed, and they lost all their bodily lustre. While lamenting, O king, they remembered the instructions of Angira and gave up their ambition to bear children. Following the directions of the Brahmanas, they went to the bank of Yamuna, where they basked and atoned for their sinful activities. Purport. In this verse, the word Bala Hatya Hata Prabha is to be particularly noted. The practice of killing children has existed in human society for a long time, since time immemorial. But in the days of yore, it was very rarely performed. At the present moment, however, in this age of Kali, abortion, killing of the child within the womb, has become very common, and sometimes a child is even killed after birth. If a woman performs such an abominable act, she gradually loses all her bodily lustre. Bal Hatya Hata Prabha. It is also to be noted that the ladies who had committed the sinful act of administering poison to the child were very much ashamed, and according to the directions of the Brahmanas, they had to undergo atonement for killing the child. Any woman who has ever performed such an infamously sinful act must atone for it, but no one is now doing that. Under the circumstances, the women responsible must suffer in this life and the next. Those who are sincere souls, after hearing this incident, should refrain from such child killing and should atone for their sinful activities by taking to Krishna consciousness very seriously. If one chants the Hare Krishna Mahamantra without offenses, all of one's sinful actions are surely atoned for immediately. But one should not commit such deeds again, for that is an offense. Text 15. Thus enlightened by the instructions of the Brahmins, Angira and Narada, King Chitraketu became fully aware of spiritual knowledge. As an elephant becomes free from a muddy reservoir of water, King Chitraketu came out of the dark zone of family life. Text 16. The king bathed in the water of the Yamuna, and according to prescribed duties, he offered oblations of water to the four fathers and demigods. Very gravely controlling his senses and mind, he then offered his respects and obeisances to the son of Lord Brahma, Angira and Narada. Text 17. Therefore, after being very much pleased with Chitraketu, who was a self-controlled devotee and surrendered soul, Narad, the most powerful sage, spoke to him the following transcendental instructions. Text 18 to 19. Narada gave Chitraketu the following mantra. O Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, who are addressed by the Omkar, I offer Pranav. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. O Lord Vasudev, I meditate upon you. O Lord Pradyuman, Lord Anirudh, and Lord Shankarshan, I offer you my respectful obeisances. O reservoir of spiritual potency, O supreme bliss, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are self-sufficient and most peaceful. O ultimate truth, one without a second, you are realized as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan, and are therefore the reservoir of all knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he is Pranav Sarva Vedeshu, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras. In transcendental knowledge, the Lord is addressed as Pranav, Omkar, which is the symbolic representation of the Lord in sound. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudev, who is an expansion of Narayan, expands himself as Pradyuman, Anirudh, and Shankarshan. From Shankarshan comes the second Narayan expansion, and from this Narayan comes further expansions of Vasudev, Pradyuman, Shankarshan, and Anirudh. The Shankarshan in this group is the original cause of the three Purushas, namely Karnodaksai Vishnu, Garbhodaksai Vishnu, and Kshirodaksai Vishnu. Kshirodaksai Vishnu is situated in every universe in a special planet called Shweta-Deepa. This is confirmed in Brahm Samhita, Andantara Stha. The word Anda means this universe. Within this universe is a planet called Shwet-Deep, where Kshirodaksai Vishnu is situated. From him come all the incarnations within this universe. As confirmed in Brahm Samhita, all these forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are Advaita, non-different, and they are also Achyuta, infallible. They do not fall down like the conditioned souls. The ordinary living entity is prone to falling into the clutches of Maya, but the Supreme Lord, in his different incarnations and forms, is Achyuta, infallible. Therefore, his body is different from the material body possessed by the conditioned soul. The word Matra is explained in the Medini dictionary as follows: Matra karna vibhushayam vite mane parichadate. The word matra in its different imports is used to indicate the decoration of the ear, possession, respect, and possessions of a, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 2.14. Matra स्पर्शास्तु कौन्तेय शीत सुख सुख दुखदा आगम अपायनो नित्य कांत दिक्षस्व भारत. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They are always called for perception, O shrine of Bharata, and they must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. In the conditioned state of life, the body is used as a dress, and as one uses different dresses during the summer and winter, we conditioned souls are changing body according to our desires. However, because the body of the Supreme Lord is full of knowledge, it needs no covering. The idea that Krishna's body is like ours, in other words, like that his body and soul are different, is a misunderstanding. There are no such differences for Krishna because his body is full of knowledge. Here we receive our material bodies because of a lack of knowledge. But because Krishna, Vasudeva, is full of knowledge, there is no difference between his body and his soul. Krishna remembers what he said 40 million years ago to sun god, but an ordinary being cannot remember what he said the day before yesterday. This is the difference between Krishna's body and our body. Therefore, the Lord is addressed as Vigyan Matraya Paramanand Murtaye. Because the Lord's body is full of knowledge, he is always enjoying the transcendental bliss. Indeed, his very form is Paramananda. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra, Anandmayo Avyasa. By nature, the Lord is Anandmay. Whenever we see Krishna, he is always full of Anand in all circumstances. No one can make him morose. Atma Ramaya, he does not need to search for external enjoyment because he is Atmaram, self-sufficient. Sankara, he has no anxiety. One who has to seek pleasure from other sources is always full of anxiety. Karmis, Jnanis and Yogis are full of anxiety because they want something, but a devotee does not want anything. He is simply satisfied in the service of the Lord, who is fully blissful. Nivrata Dvaita Drishtaye. In our conditioned life, our bodies have different parts. But although Krishna currently has different bodily parts, no part of his body is different from any other part. Krishna can see with his eyes, and Krishna can see without his eyes. Therefore, in the Shwara Upanishad, it is said, Pashyati Achakshu. He can see with his hands and legs. He does not need a particular body part to perform a particular action. Angani Yasa Sakalendriya Varti Manti. He can do anything he desires with any part of his body, and therefore he is called Almighty. Text 20. Perceiving your personal bliss, you are always transcendental to the waves of material nature. Therefore, my Lord, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. You are the supreme controller of the senses, and your expansions of form are unlimited. You are the greatest, and therefore I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Further, this verse analytically differentiates the living entity from the Supreme Lord. The form of the Lord and the form of the conditioned soul are different because the Lord is always blissful, whereas the conditioned soul is always under the threefold miseries of material body. The Supreme Lord is Sachidanand Vigraha. He derives Ananda, bliss, from his own self. The Lord's body is transcendental, spiritual, But because the conditioned soul has a material body, he has many bodily and mental troubles. The conditioned soul is always perturbed by attachment and detachment, whereas the Supreme Lord is always free from such dualities. The Lord is the Supreme Master of all the senses, whereas the conditioned soul is controlled by the senses. The Lord is the greatest, whereas the living entity is the smallest. The living entity is conditioned by the waves of material nature, but the Supreme Lord is transcendental to all actions and reactions. The expansions of the Supreme Lord's body are innumerable. Advaitam achyutam manati ananta rupam. But the conditioned soul is limited to only one form. From history we learn that a conditioned soul, by mystic power, can sometimes expand into 8 forms. But the Lord's bodily expansions are unlimited. This means that the bodies of Supreme Personality of Godhead have no beginning and no end, unlike bodies of the
Thank you. I'll come down in 5-10 minutes.
5-10 मिनट में हमारे ओके
Blue box.
Blue box.
Walking shoe.
रेडी मैंने
Okay. Okay.
6:30
Okay.
Yes. If it is comfortable for you, then bring. अभी तो आते हैं।
चले गए
हाँ
आपको गए हैं
मिल जाओ क्या हमारा सर? हाँ कपड़ा चेंज करके जाओगे सिल जाओ सिल जाओ।
राधे देवेश भी गया है क्या? इसी सड़क पे वॉक कर रहे हैं।
तो फिर उधर चाकू है। थोड़ा सा पास करना।
आपका पूरा नाम क्या है?
निरंजन माधव दास। निरंजन माधव दास।
निरंजन माधव। महाराज क्या बोले? तुम्हें दीक्षा दूंगा।
हाँ।
और गोरंगा पुल ठीक ठाक है नहीं?
Krishna Preyasi Rama. Kanika Papani Brahmatwadi Kanika Kanika Masanti Padakshi Nakare Kare Kanika Papani Brahmatwadi Kanika Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram. जय गिरिराज महाराज की जय। कृष्ण बलराम जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा श्री गौरता है। जय वृंदावन धाम की जय। शिल प्रपात की जय।